Hey guys, tonight we're going to a small town on the very tip of Long Island, a place known as Montauk. Imagine a misty morning, the salty air hanging heavy with the scent of pine and ocean spray. You're standing on a lonely stretch of beach, the waves whispering secrets to the shore. There's an old, rusted chain-link fence behind you, topped with menacing razor wire, a barrier to a place the locals call the Montauk Air Force Station. You can feel the chill of the wind picking up, and you realize you forgot your jacket. You shiver, not from the cold, but from the feeling that you're about to walk into a place from which you might not return. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. Find a soft pillow, grab a cozy blanket, and change your location and local time to Montauk, New York, in the autumn of 1983. Now, let's turn off the lights and enjoy the ride tonight. The first boy vanished on a Tuesday. Billy Caldwell was his name, a 9-year-old with a mop of sandy hair and a knack for finding trouble. He lived with his grandmother in a small, weathered cottage just a stone's throw from the Montauk Bluffs. One minute, he was chasing a stray dog down a winding dirt path. The next, he was gone. Not a scream, not a single trace. His dog returned, whimpering and confused, but Billy was nowhere to be found. The local police, a small force used to dealing with lost tourists and minor break-ins, were baffled. They organized search parties, combed the beaches and forests, and called in the state troopers. But the search came empty. It was as if Billy had simply ceased to exist. A week later, another boy vanished. This time it was Tommy Jenkins, a gangly 11-year-old who loved building elaborate forts in the woods. His disappearance was just as inexplicable. One minute, he was gathering branches, his father working just a field away, and the next, he was gone. The town, already on edge from Billy's disappearance, was now gripped by a quiet panic. Parents began keeping their children indoors, the streets growing eerily silent after dusk. Whispers began to circulate. Some talked of a shadowy figure seen lurking near the Montauk base, an abandoned military installation that loomed over the town like a concrete scar. Others spoke of a creature, a wild beast preying on the children. The police, however, dismissed these rumors as local folklore. They had no leads, no suspects, and no explanation. The town was forced to confront a terrifying reality. Something was taking their children, and they were powerless to stop it. The disappearances continued, each one more baffling than the last. A third child, then a fourth. The silence grew louder. It was the sound of a town holding its breath, waiting for the next one to disappear.
The disappearances had been the lead story for nearly a month, but now they were just a footnote. A jaded, cynical journalist named Jack had arrived from the city, assigned to write a puff piece on a small-town struggle with loss. He saw Montauk as a backwater, its residents as simple folk caught up in a hysteria he couldn't comprehend. His editor wanted human interest, a sob story with a neat little bow on top, but all Jack found was a wall of silence and suspicion. The townsfolk saw him as an outsider, a carrion crow waiting for the next tragedy. He was about to pack his bags and write a story about how there was no story when he met Sarah. Sarah wasn't much older than the missing boys, perhaps 12 or 13, with a quiet intensity in her dark eyes. She found him sitting on a bench overlooking the ocean, a half-eaten sandwich on his lap. "You're Jack," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. The reporter, Jack, taken aback, nodded. "You're wasting your time talking to the police," she continued, her gaze fixed on the ominous outline of the Montauk base. "They won't tell you the truth. They don't even know it." Jack's journalistic curiosity, dormant for weeks, suddenly sparked to life. He saw not a naive child, but a kindred spirit, someone who, like him, felt the gnawing emptiness of a story left untold. Sarah revealed that she was friends with Billy Caldwell and Tommy Jenkins. She was also a brilliant amateur astronomer, and her small old telescope was a window to the night sky, a place she felt safer than on the ground. She told Jack about the strange things she had been seeing, flashes of light from the direction of the abandoned Montauk base, not like lightning, but more like a camera flash, a silent, blinding burst that lasted only a fraction of a second. She also spoke of a strange humming sound that would sometimes fill the air, a low-frequency vibration that made the glass in her windows rattle. Jack, who had dismissed the local rumors as nonsense, found himself listening. He had gone to the police station and had come up empty. Maybe, just maybe, this girl knew something. Her calm conviction was a stark contrast to the panicked whispers of the adults. The two of them, the cynical journalist and the sharp-eyed girl, formed an unlikely alliance. He needed a lead, and she had a theory that no one else would listen to.
Jack and Sarah's investigation led them to the very place the town feared most, the Montauk base. The chain-linked fence, remember it? The one with the razor wire? They found a hole in it, crudely cut, as if someone had wanted to get in, or perhaps get out. The air inside the perimeter was different, thick with an almost electric charge that made the hair on Jack's arms stand up. The buildings were a labyrinth of rusted metal and broken concrete, but in the heart of it all was a subterranean entrance, a massive blast door that looked like something out of a Cold War movie. It was a place frozen in time, its purpose a mystery to the outside world, a secret the government had hoped would be buried with its past. The truth, however, was about to surface. Sarah was the one who saw it first. A faded photograph tacked to a corkboard in what appeared to be an old control room. It was a picture of a group of scientists, all in pristine white lab coats, standing in front of a massive circular device. In the center of the group, a distinguished-looking man with a kind smile held a young boy on his lap. The boy had sandy hair and a familiar look. It was Billy Caldwell, the very first boy to vanish. Sarah's small hand trembled as she pointed to the man. "That's my grandpa," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "He was a scientist here. He told me bedtime stories about this place, but I always thought they were just stories." Jack's heart hammered against his ribs. The human interest story had just turned into a conspiracy theory, and the girl who was supposed to be his source was now a part of the story herself. The pieces were finally beginning to connect. Her grandfather, a scientist at the base, the missing boys, the strange flashes of light, and the humming. As they delved deeper into the forgotten base, they found old logbooks and project reports. The code names were a jumble of letters and numbers, but the dates were all the same, 1983. The notes were filled with technical jargon, but one phrase kept reappearing: Project Phoenix. There were drawings and schematics of the very machine from the photograph, a massive electromagnetic coil that looked like a giant clock. One of the reports was titled Phase 2, Temporal Displacement. Jack and Sarah realized they weren't just looking at a secret military base, they were looking at a secret history, a history of an experiment that had gone terribly wrong. A time portal. The air in the subterranean bunker grew thick with a sense of dread. The buzzing sound, remember it? The one Sarah heard from her telescope? It was 100 times louder now, a low-frequency hum that seemed to vibrate in their very bones. At the center of the control room stood the colossal device, the time portal itself. The circular coils hummed with a soft, otherworldly glow. It wasn't the menacing industrial hum of a machine. It was the hum of something alive, something that was breathing. The logbooks confirmed their worst fears. The scientists at Montauk Base had successfully created a temporal rift, a stable wormhole that could be used to send objects or people through time. The problem was, they couldn't control it. The portal, it turned out, wasn't a one-way door. It was a bridge, a fragile link between 2 points in time that were never meant to be connected. The first time they activated it, they sent a small test drone into the future. It returned a moment later, battered and rusted, as if it had been 1,000 years. The second time, they tried to send a plant back in time. It vanished, and in its place, a strange crystalline fern from an unknown era appeared, its leaves shimmering with an alien light. The third time, they sent a team of scientists to observe, but they never came back. It was in the fourth experiment, the one that involved the children, that everything fell apart. According to the logbooks, the scientists were trying to create a stable temporal bubble, a pocket of time where a person could exist without fear of being unraveled by the temporal currents. Their theory was that a younger mind, a child's mind, would be more adaptable, more resilient. The children weren't abducted. They were part of a secret program. Their parents, including Sarah's grandfather, were willing participants, desperate to see their offspring become part of a new world, a new era. The children were promised a journey, an adventure. But the experiment failed. The portal didn't just send the children away, it created a paradox. It didn't just open a door, it shattered the fabric of reality. The children weren't missing. They were caught between 2 times, 2 realities. They existed and did not exist. Their presence a whisper in one reality and a scream in another. The disappearances were the result of the portal destabilizing, pulling the children and sometimes parts of the town into a fractured timeline. The Montauk project wasn't a secret military experiment. It was a desperate attempt to fix a broken timeline, a reality created by the scientists' own hubris.
The terrifying truth was now a cold, hard fact. The time portal hadn't just sent a few kids into the past or future. It had created an alternate reality that was slowly bleeding into their own. Jack and Sarah saw the first signs of it in the control room. The old analog clocks on the wall, their hands long since frozen, would occasionally jump forward or backward a few minutes at a time. The photographs on the corkboard, the ones from the Montauk project, would flicker, the people in them momentarily replaced by shadowy, elongated figures with vacant eyes. The air grew colder, and the humming from the portal deepened into a low, menacing growl. The Montauk that they knew was starting to fray at the edges, and a darker, more dangerous reality was seeping in. This alternate reality was a perversion of their own world. The sky was a sickly yellow, the trees twisted and gnarled as if in perpetual agony. The ocean, remember the salty scent? In this reality, it smelled of decay and ozone. The town of Montauk was a ghost town, its homes half dissolved into a strange, crystalline substance. The people were still there, but they were silent, motionless, their faces locked in expressions of eternal horror. And the children, the ones who had vanished, were no longer missing. They were everywhere, their ghostly forms flitting through the shadows, their laughter a chilling echo in the otherwise silent town. They weren't ghosts, they were echoes, reverberations of their original selves trapped in a fractured timeline. The portal had connected their world to a reality that was a twisted reflection of their own. And the longer it stayed open, the more their world would resemble the new one. The disappearances were just the beginning. The world as they knew it was on a slow and painful march toward extinction, replaced by a grim, desolate reality, born from a scientific experiment gone horribly wrong. Jack, the cynical journalist who had come for a simple story, was now face to face with the end of the world. He looked at Sarah, her face illuminated by the flickering lights of the control room. Her grandfather, her family, her friends, they were all a part of this impending disaster. He saw the Montauk base not as a relic of the past, but as a ticking time bomb.
The silence in the abandoned town wasn't just a sign of a town in mourning. It was the sound of a world slowly giving way, and the humming from the portal was its final, fatal heartbeat. The time portal was not just a means of travel. It was a wound in the fabric of reality, and it was threatening to consume everything.
A cold, hard dread had settled over Jack and Sarah. They realized that staying still, waiting for the inevitable, was no longer an option. The hum of the portal was getting louder, the flickering in their reality more frequent. They had to act, and they had to act fast. Sarah, with her knowledge of her grandfather's work, had an idea. She remembered a story he had told her, a tale she had always dismissed as a fanciful bedtime story. He had talked about a fail-safe, a way to shut down the portal if the experiment went wrong. It was a simple solution, almost elegantly so, but it required them to access the core of the machine itself, a place her grandfather called the temporal core. The core was located deep within the bunker, a chamber that had been sealed off and forgotten. To get there, they would have to navigate a maze of rusted metal walkways, flickering lights, and abandoned laboratories. Remember the smell of ozone and decay? It was stronger here, almost thick enough to taste. They passed by old computer terminals, their screens showing ghostly images of the missing children playing in a field, a constant, looping reminder of the lives that had been disrupted by this scientific folly. Sarah led the way, her small hand clutching a flashlight, its beam dancing on the walls. She remembered the floor plan, not from a blueprint, but from a story, a memory of a little girl listening to her grandfather describe the layout of his secret laboratory. She pointed to a massive blast door, the words Project Phoenix, Temporal Core, stenciled across it in faded paint. The plan was simple. They had to bypass the door's security, a simple keypad that had been long since disconnected, and then reach the core. Her grandfather had told her about a hidden circuit breaker, a manual switch that would cut off the power to the entire base, including the portal. It was a desperate, all-or-nothing move. If they succeeded, the portal would close, and the alternate reality would fade away. But if they failed, if they couldn't reach the switch in time, the portal would destabilize completely, and both realities would collapse into a single, unlivable one. Jack, the jaded journalist, had transformed into a determined hero. He saw not a story, but a chance to right a terrible wrong, to save a town, and perhaps the world. He knew this was no longer a human interest piece. It was a race against time itself. The journey to the temporal core was a chilling one, a descent into the belly of the beast. The flickering lights of the hallway cast long, dancing shadows that looked eerily like the ghostly figures they had seen in the alternate reality. Jack and Sarah moved as one, their breathing in sync, their focus a singular point, the glowing temporal core sign at the end of the corridor. The humming from the portal was now a deafening roar, shaking the very foundations of the Montauk base. They could see the effects of the destabilizing timeline all around them. The concrete walls were now transparent in places, revealing fleeting glimpses of a desolate, alien landscape. The old, rusty pipes bled not water, but a thick, viscous goo. The air was a cocktail of ozone and decay, a pungent reminder of the reality that was threatening to consume their own. They finally reached the blast door, a massive, imposing barrier of steel. Sarah's small hands, remember how they were trembling before? They were now steady as she traced the ancient, disconnected wires of the keypad.
She pulled out a small rusty screwdriver from her backpack, a forgotten tool from her grandfather's old workshop. He had told her a secret, a little trick about the door. It wasn't a keypad, it was a circuit puzzle, a simple series of connections that, if done correctly, would bypass the security. Jack held the flashlight steady, his hand surprisingly calm. He watched as Sarah worked, her brow furrowed in concentration. The roar from the portal was at its peak, and they could feel the pressure in the air, a sense of impending doom. With a final twist of the screwdriver, the door shuddered, and with a sound of grinding metal and groaning gears, swung open, revealing the temporal core. Inside, the light was blinding. The temporal core was not a machine, but a swirling vortex of pure energy, a kaleidoscope of colors that defied description. It was beautiful and terrifying all at once, a pulsating cosmic heart. Sarah pointed to a small red lever at the base of the core. "That's it," she said, her voice a small whisper against the roar. "That's the switch." As she took a step toward the core, a ghostly figure materialized in front of her. It was a young boy with sandy hair, his face locked in an expression of fear. Billy Caldwell. He was no longer a phantom. He was a living, breathing echo, trapped in the vortex. He reached out to Sarah, his hand almost solid, and whispered, "Don't! It's not our fault." Sarah hesitated. A part of her wanted to reach out to save him, but she knew she couldn't. She had to make a choice. Save one boy or save the world.
Sarah stood frozen, her eyes locked with Billy's. The ghostly boy's hand reached out, his face a silent plea. But then she heard Jack's voice, calm and steady. "Sarah, you have to." The words were a lifeline, a pull back to the present, to the reality they were fighting to save. She looked at Billy one last time, a tear tracing a path down her cheek. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "This isn't your fault." With a painful resolve, she pulled the lever. There was no thunder, no lightning, just a sudden, deafening silence. The roaring hum from the temporal core vanished, the swirling colors dissolved, replaced by a soft, gentle glow that pulsed for a moment and then faded to black. The ghostly figures, the glimpses of the desolate world, they all faded with it, like a bad dream upon waking. The Montauk base was silent once more. The hum was gone, the flickering lights were now steady, and the scent of ozone had been replaced by the familiar, damp smell of old concrete and sea air. Jack and Sarah walked out of the bunker, their eyes adjusting to the dim moonlight. The town of Montauk was exactly as they had left it, the houses still standing, the streetlights casting a soft glow on the empty streets. The town was safe. But the world they saved was not the same one they had entered. The missing children, the ones who had been lost in the temporal currents, were still gone. The portal had closed, but it had not returned them. They were echoes, frozen in time, their destinies unwritten. The days that followed were a blur. The Montauk base was officially sealed off, deemed a historical site. But the town knew the truth. They talked about it in hushed tones, the memory of the missing children a constant, painful ache. The strange flashes of light and the humming sounds were gone, but the quiet that had taken their place felt heavier. Jack wrote his story, but it was not the one his editor had wanted. He wrote about a town that had faced a supernatural threat and had survived, not through a miracle, but through the courage of a young girl. He wrote about the terrible burden of a secret history. Sarah, for her part, went back to her astronomy, but her gaze was no longer on the stars. She looked at the moon, and she saw not a rock, but a promise. A promise that no matter how dark the night,
there would always be light. And so, my friends, that brings our story to a close for tonight. The Montauk Base, a place where time itself was fractured and the past became a living, breathing shadow, is now just a rumor, a whisper on the wind. But the story lingers, a reminder that the world is more mysterious and more dangerous than we can ever imagine. The things we cannot see are often the most powerful. They're the things that shape our lives. But you're safe now. The lights are back on. The world is solid and still. There are no temporal portals opening in your room. Your bed is comfortable, your blankets are soft, and the only sound you hear is the gentle rhythm of your own breath. So close your eyes, drift off, and let the echoes of Montauk fade into the quiet comfort of the night. Good night.